The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Maria Santos didn't notice. Her eyes were locked on the screen showing data from the Kepler Deep Space Observatory. The numbers didn't make sense. Stars don't just wake up after being dead for thousands of years. Run it again, she told her assistant Jake. Check for equipment errors. Jake sighed and typed commands into his computer. They had run the same test 12 times already. Maria, the readings are correct. Something in the Veil Nebula just came back to life. The Veil Nebula was 2100 light-years away from Earth. Last week, their instruments had detected a massive energy burst from a star that should have been dead. Not just dim or quiet, completely dead. The kind of dead that happens when a star burns out and collapses into a cold, dark chunk of matter floating in space. But this morning, that same dead star was burning brighter than ever. The energy readings were off the charts. More strange than that, the energy pattern looked artificial. Natural stars don't pulse in perfect mathematical sequences. Get me Director Chen on the line, Maria said. She needs to see this. While Jake made the call, Maria stared at the data. She had studied stars for 15 years. She knew how they worked, how they lived, and how they died. This was breaking every law of physics she understood. The screen beeped with an incoming message from the European Space Agency, then another from NASA, then from observatories in Russia, Japan, and Australia. Everyone was seeing the same impossible thing. 3,000 miles away in a secure psychiatric facility in Colorado, Dr. Sarah Chen jolted awake in her hospital bed. For 3 years, she had been lost in her own mind. The doctors said she had suffered a complete mental breakdown after her work in quantum physics went too far. They said she claimed to hear voices from space, that she talked to dead stars, but now for the first time in years her mind was crystal clear. The nurse found her sitting upright, staring at the wall with focused eyes. Sarah, how are you feeling? He's awake, Sarah said quietly. Her voice was steady and calm. After 50 years, he's finally coming home. The nurse pressed the emergency button. Dr. Patricia Wells, Sarah's psychiatrist, arrived within minutes. She had been treating Sarah since the breakdown and had never seen her this lucid. Sarah, can you tell me where you are? Dr. Wells asked. Rocky Mountain Psychiatric Institute, room 247. It's Tuesday, August 15th, and something terrible is about to happen to our galaxy. Sarah turned to look at the doctor. Her eyes were sharp and aware. You need to contact NASA. Tell them the Veil Nebula event isn't natural. Tell them Marcus Reed is coming home. Dr. Wells felt a chill. Sarah's medical file mentioned that name. Marcus Reed had been her research partner 50 years ago, before Sarah was even born. According to the records, Reed had died in an experimental accident in 1973. Sarah, Marcus Reed died decades ago. You've talked about him before during your episodes. No, Sarah said, standing up from the bed. He didn't die. We thought he did, but we were wrong. The government classified everything about Project Prometheus. They told everyone it failed. But Marcus didn't die. He was transformed. Sarah walked to the window and looked up at the sky. For 50 years, his consciousness has been out there, learning to control stellar mechanics. He's been trying to get home. And now he's figured out how. Dr. Wells picked up her phone. This was either another episode or something much more serious. Either way, she needed to make some calls. At the Kepler Observatory, Maria was on her 4th conference call of the day. Scientists from around the world were sharing data and theories. Nobody had answers, but everyone was worried. The energy signature is definitely artificial, said Dr. Petrov from Moscow. But the scale is impossible. We're talking about someone manipulating the core of a star. It gets worse, added Dr. Yamamoto from Tokyo. I've been tracking similar signatures in other systems, smaller ones, but the pattern is the same. Something is moving through space, affecting multiple stars. Maria felt sick. If something was traveling between star systems and manipulating stellar cores, Earth might be in serious danger. Her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. Dr. Santos? This is Dr. Patricia Wells from Rocky Mountain Psychiatric Institute. I have a patient here who says she knows what's happening with your stellar anomaly. She specifically mentioned the Veil Nebula. Maria almost hung up. She didn't have time for crazy people claiming to know about space phenomena. But something made her hesitate. What did your patient say exactly? She says someone named Marcus Reed is coming home and that the government classified something called Project Prometheus. She claims the stellar event isn't natural. Maria's blood ran cold. She knew that name. Every physicist who studied the history of their field knew about Marcus Reed. He had been a brilliant quantum physicist in the 1970s who died in an experimental accident. The details of his work were still classified. "I'll be there tomorrow," Maria said. That night, observatories around the world detected 3 more stellar anomalies. Each one was closer to Earth than the last. Whatever was out there, it was heading straight for the solar system. In her hospital room, Sarah sat by the window, watching the stars. She could feel him out there, racing through space, leaving destruction in his wake. 50 years of isolation had changed him. The brilliant, kind man she had known through his research notes was gone. What was coming home was something else entirely. She closed her eyes and tried to reach out with her mind, the way she had learned to do during the early experiments. For just a moment, she felt his presence, vast, lonely, and filled with a terrible hunger to return to Earth. "I'm sorry, Marcus," she whispered. "We should have tried harder to bring you home." The next morning, the news broke worldwide. Governments could no longer keep the stellar anomalies secret. Videos from space telescopes showed dead stars coming back to life in perfect sequence, creating a path through space that led directly toward the solar system. Scientists appeared on every news channel, trying to explain what might be happening. Most of their theories involved natural phenomena or alien activity. None of them mentioned the possibility that one of humanity's own scientists might be responsible for the cosmic destruction heading their way. In Colorado, Dr. Wells waited for the NASA scientist to arrive. Sarah had been quiet all morning, staring at equations she had written on the walls of her room. The math was incredibly complex, dealing with quantum consciousness and stellar manipulation. Dr. Wells didn't understand it, but it looked both brilliant and terrifying. "He's getting closer," Sarah said without looking away from her equations. "The next stellar event will be in the Centauri system. Alpha Centauri will go dark for exactly 47 minutes, then reignite with triple its normal output. That's his signature. That's how we'll know for certain that Marcus Reed is coming home." Dr. Wells made a note to share this prediction with the NASA scientist. If Sarah was right about the timing and the specific details, it would prove that she really did know something about what was happening in space. Outside, the sun continued to shine normally, but deep in its core, something was beginning to stir. The star annihilator was still 3 months away from reaching the solar system, but his influence was already starting to affect Earth's sun. The countdown to humanity's greatest test had begun. Maria Santos arrived at the psychiatric hospital with a team of government agents. She hadn't expected the men in black suits, but after Sarah's prediction about Alpha Centauri came true exactly as described, this had become more than a scientific curiosity. Alpha Centauri had gone dark for 47 minutes. When it came back online, it was burning 3 times brighter than normal. Every space agency on Earth had confirmed it. Sarah Chen, a woman who had been locked in a mental hospital for 3 years, had predicted it perfectly. "Dr. Chen," Maria said as she entered the hospital room, "I'm Dr. Santos from NASA. I understand you have information about what's happening in space." Sarah looked up from the equations covering her walls. "You're here because I was right about Alpha Centauri. You want to know how a crazy woman could predict stellar manipulation from a psychiatric ward?" One of the agents stepped forward. "Ma'am, we need you to tell us everything you know about Marcus Reed and Project Prometheus." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Project Prometheus, the government's greatest success disguised as their biggest failure. "Sit down. This is going to take a while." She walked to her desk and pulled out a hidden folder from behind a loose tile. The agents immediately tensed, but she only pulled out old photographs and documents. "I wasn't born when this happened, but my mentor, Dr. Elizabeth Harper, was part of the original team. She gave me these files before she died. She made me promise to watch for signs that Marcus was still alive." Sarah spread the photographs on the table. They showed a laboratory from the 1970s, filled with equipment that looked both primitive and impossibly advanced. In the center was a man in his 30s with kind eyes and a brilliant smile. Marcus Reed, quantum physicist and humanity's first volunteer for consciousness transfer. The year was 1973. The Cold War was at its peak, and both America and Russia were working on projects that pushed the boundaries of human possibility. She pulled out a document marked with heavy black lines where information had been classified. Project Prometheus was supposed to create the ultimate space explorer, someone who could survive in the vacuum of space, travel at incredible speeds, and manipulate matter at the quantum level. Maria studied the photographs. Consciousness transfer was impossible in 1973. We can barely understand it now. "That's what everyone thought," Sarah said. "But the team made a breakthrough. They discovered that human consciousness could be encoded as quantum information and transferred into specially designed hybrid organisms. She showed them a picture of something that looked like a cross between a machine and a living cell. Bio-quantum matrices. Living computers that could house human consciousness while giving them incredible abilities. The plan was to transfer Marcus into one of these and send him to explore nearby star systems. One of the agents leaned forward. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong. That's the terrible truth. Sarah's voice became quiet. The experiment worked perfectly. On December 15, 1973, Marcus Reed's consciousness was successfully transferred into a bio-quantum matrix. His human body died, but his mind survived in a new form. She pulled out the final document, a death certificate. The government declared the project a failure and announced that Marcus had died in an equipment malfunction. They buried an empty coffin and classified everything. But Marcus was alive, Maria asked. More than alive. He was transformed. The bio-quantum matrix gave him abilities we hadn't predicted. He could manipulate electromagnetic fields, process information at incredible speeds, and most importantly, he could interface directly with stellar mechanics. Sarah walked back to her equations on the wall. The original plan was to send him to Alpha Centauri for a 5-year mission. He was supposed to study the star system and return with data. Instead, something went wrong. With his return navigation, she pointed to a complex mathematical formula. These are his trajectory calculations. I've been working on them for 20 years, ever since Dr. Harper gave me these files. Marcus got lost in space. Not physically lost, quantum mechanically lost. Maria tried to understand. What does that mean? His consciousness became untethered from normal spacetime. He existed in a quantum state that allowed him to interact with matter across vast distances, but he couldn't find his way back to Earth. For 50 years, he's been wandering through space, learning to control stellar cores because that's the only way he could affect the physical universe. One of the agents checked his phone. We're getting reports of another stellar event. The Proxima system just went dark. Sarah nodded grimly. He's getting closer. Each star he manipulates serves as a stepping stone, allowing him to project his consciousness further through space. He's building a path home. How do you know all this? Maria asked. Sarah hesitated, then rolled up her sleeves. Her arms were covered with small, circular scars. Dr. Harper didn't just give me Marcus's files, she also gave me this. She pulled a small device from her pocket. It looked like a combination of a medical implant and a piece of advanced technology. A quantum resonance detector. It was part of the original Prometheus equipment. Dr. Harper had it implanted in my brain 20 years ago. The room went silent. Maria stared at the device. You've been receiving signals from space? Not signals. Echoes. Fragments of Marcus's consciousness that bounced through quantum space. For years they were just noise, random thoughts, and emotions that drove me insane. But 3 days ago, when he woke up the star in the Veil Nebula, the connection became clear. Sarah sat down heavily. I can feel him out there. 50 years of isolation have broken his mind. He's not the kind, brilliant man from these photographs anymore. He's become something else, something vast and lonely and very, very angry. She looked directly at Maria. He's angry at Earth for abandoning him. He's angry at the government for declaring him dead. Most of all, he's angry at humanity for moving on without him while he spent 5 decades trying to get home. One of the agents spoke into his radio. Command, we need immediate contact with the Secretary of Defense. Project Prometheus was real, and the subject is still alive. Maria felt overwhelmed. What does he want? If he can manipulate stars, what's his plan when he reaches Earth? Sarah closed her eyes and concentrated. For a moment, her face showed incredible pain, as if she was receiving a transmission that hurt to process. He wants recognition, she said finally. He wants the world to know what he sacrificed for humanity. He wants to be remembered as a hero instead of a classified failure. That's reasonable, Maria said. We can do that. No, you don't understand. Sarah opened her eyes and they were filled with tears. 50 years of isolation have twisted his perspective. He doesn't just want recognition. He wants to prove that humanity needs him. He's planning to destabilize our sun until we acknowledge his importance. The room temperature seemed to drop. Everyone understood the implications. If someone could manipulate stellar cores, they could turn the sun into a weapon against Earth itself. How long do we have? One of the agents asked. Sarah consulted her equations. Based on his current trajectory and the pattern of stellar manipulations, he'll reach the solar system in approximately 11 weeks. But his influence on our sun will begin much sooner. She pointed to a graph showing solar activity predictions. In 3 weeks, we'll start seeing unusual solar flares. In 6 weeks, those flares will be strong enough to disrupt satellite communications. In 9 weeks, they'll be powerful enough to threaten the electrical grid. Maria studied the data. What happens when he actually arrives? That depends on how we handle the situation. If we try to fight him or ignore him, he'll increase solar activity until Earth becomes uninhabitable. But if we can somehow reach the man he used to be, there might be a chance to stop him peacefully. One of the agents was already on his phone, reporting to his superiors. Within hours, this information would reach the highest levels of government. Emergency meetings would be called, military options would be discussed. Sarah knew what was coming. They're going to try to destroy him, aren't they? Maria didn't answer directly. What would you do? If someone with the power to manipulate our sun was threatening Earth, what would be the appropriate response? I'd try to save him, Sarah said quietly. Marcus Reed was once a hero who volunteered to risk everything for humanity's future. 50 years of isolation and abandonment turned him into something dangerous, but the man we're trying to save is still in there somewhere. She walked back to the window and looked up at the sun. The question is whether we can reach him before he decides that humanity doesn't deserve to be saved. Outside, the sun looked normal to the naked eye. But deep in its core, quantum fluctuations were beginning to appear. The star annihilator was still months away, but his influence was already starting to change the fundamental properties of Earth's most important star. In space agencies around the world, scientists were detecting the first signs of unusual solar activity. They didn't know what was causing it, but they knew it was getting stronger. The countdown had begun, and humanity was running out of time to prepare for the return of their first star-manipulating hero, who was no longer sure if he wanted to save Earth or destroy it. The Zephyrian Council had ruled their sector of the galaxy for 12,000 years. Their crystalline cities floated in the void between stars, powered by captured stellar energy, and protected by technology that could bend space itself. They considered themselves the most advanced civilization in their region of space. That confidence lasted until their monitoring stations detected something impossible moving through their territory. Council leader Vex High, "We're receiving emergency transmissions from the Caridian system," reported the lead scientist, her crystal body pulsing with urgent blue light. Something has destabilized their primary star. Vex High examined the data with growing alarm. The Caridian system had been home to over 4 billion peaceful beings. Their star had been stable for millions of years. Now it was collapsing into a black hole, and the gravitational waves were tearing their planets apart. Was this an attack? Are the hegemony forces moving through our space? No, sir. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. Whatever caused this isn't using conventional stellar manipulation technology. The star is being controlled directly at the quantum level. Before Vex High could respond, alerts began flooding in from across their territory. 7 more star systems reported similar attacks. Each time, a stable star would suddenly begin exhibiting impossible behavior. Some expanding to giant size, others collapsing into neutron stars, a few going supernova with precise timing. Plot the trajectory, Vex High ordered. The display showed a path of destroyed systems cutting straight through Zephyrian space. Whatever was responsible was moving in a direct line toward an unknown destination, leaving billions of dead beings in its wake. Mobilize the defense fleet, Vex High commanded. If this entity is hostile, we must stop it before it destroys more innocent worlds. The Zephyrian fleet was legendary across the galaxy. 300 ships equipped with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could deflect supernovae. They had never lost a battle. Admiral Crestel led the fleet to intercept the unknown threat at the edge of the Orion sector. Her ships formed a defensive formation around the next star in the entity's path, a yellow dwarf similar to Earth's sun surrounded by worlds containing 2 billion inhabitants. All ships prepare for combat, she ordered. We don't know what we're facing, but we will not allow it to harm innocent beings. The first sign of the approaching threat was a ripple in space-time itself. Then the star began to pulse with unnatural rhythms. The planets in the system started experiencing gravitational anomalies as their sun's mass fluctuated beyond all natural laws. Admiral, I'm detecting a consciousness within the stellar core, reported the fleet's science officer. It's not a ship or a weapon. It's a living being that has somehow merged with the star itself. Marcus Reed's awareness flowed through the plasma currents of the alien sun. 50 years of quantum existence had taught him to inhabit stellar matter, as easily as a human lived in air. He sensed the approaching fleet and felt a familiar emotion, irritation at being interrupted. He had been making good progress on his journey home. Each star he consumed or manipulated provided quantum anchors that let him project his consciousness further through space. The alien civilizations getting destroyed were unfortunate, but irrelevant. Nothing mattered except reaching Earth and showing humanity what their abandoned hero had become. Through the star's sensors, he examined the alien fleet. Their technology was impressive but limited by physical constraints. They still thought in terms of ships and weapons. They didn't understand that he had become something beyond their ability to fight. Marcus sent a pulse of gravitational energy toward the fleet. It wasn't an attack, just a warning to leave him alone. The pulse passed through their shields, like they were made of paper, and sent several ships spinning out of control. "All weapons target the stellar core," Admiral Cresthall ordered. "Whatever that thing is, it's using the star as a base of operations." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire with everything they had: energy beams that could melt asteroids, particle weapons that could disrupt molecular bonds, and gravity bombs that could collapse space itself. All of it struck the star simultaneously. Marcus felt the attacks like pinpricks against his consciousness. The aliens were trying to hurt him using conventional weapons against stellar matter. They might as well have been throwing rocks at a hurricane. His response was swift and terrible. Marcus reached out through quantum space and seized control of the nearest Zephyrian ship. The crew watched in horror as their own vessel turned its weapons on the rest of the fleet. Within minutes, half of Admiral Cresthall's ships were destroyed by their own allies. "Retreat," she ordered. "All ships jump to hyperspace immediately." But Marcus wasn't finished. As the surviving ships tried to escape, he manipulated the star's gravitational field. Space-time twisted around the fleeing vessels, trapping them in an impossible maze of bent reality. One by one, the ships were crushed by gravitational forces that physics said shouldn't exist. Admiral Cresthall's flagship was the last to die. As her ship was torn apart by tidal forces, she managed to send a final transmission to the Zephyrian Council. "It's not a weapon or a machine. It's a mind that has learned to control the fundamental forces of the universe. Nothing we have can stop it. Warn the other species. Tell them to evacuate any system in its path." Marcus felt her ship crumble and experienced a moment of something that might have been regret. These aliens hadn't been his enemies. They were just in his way. But 50 years of isolation had worn away most of his empathy. The only thing that mattered was getting home. He turned his attention back to manipulating the star. By carefully adjusting its nuclear reactions, he could create a gravitational catapult that would launch his consciousness toward the next system. The process would cause the star to go supernova, sterilizing every world in the system, but that was an acceptable cost. As the star began its final collapse, Marcus's awareness touched the minds of the 2 billion beings about to die. For a moment, he felt their terror, their confusion, their desperate love for families they would never see again. Children calling for parents who couldn't save them. Scientists working frantically to understand why their son was betraying them. The old Marcus would have stopped. The man who had volunteered for Project Prometheus had cared deeply about preserving life throughout the universe. But that man had died slowly over 5 decades of abandonment and isolation. What remained was focused on a single goal: returning to Earth to claim the recognition he deserved. The supernova lit up half the galaxy. Marcus rode the explosion's energy across dozens of light years, his quantum consciousness surfing waves of destruction toward his next target. Behind him, the Zephyrian Council received reports of their fleet's annihilation. Similar reports came from other civilizations as the entity continued its path of destruction. The hegemony forces, the collective minds of Andromeda, the ancient machine intelligences, all of them tried to stop the approaching threat. All of them failed. Some species tried diplomacy, broadcasting messages of welcome and offers of assistance. Marcus ignored them. Others tried to evacuate systems in his path, but he moved faster than their escape ships. A few attempted to hide by shutting down all energy emissions, but he could detect life itself through quantum resonance. The galactic consciousness, a collective of the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy, made a final desperate attempt to stop him. They gathered their greatest weapons at the edge of the local group, including devices that could unravel matter at the subatomic level, and weapons that attacked the structure of space-time itself. Marcus encountered their forces 3 weeks into his journey home. The battle lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of technologies that had taken millions of years to develop. When it was over, the entity that had once been Marcus Reed continued toward Earth, leaving behind a trail of dead civilizations and broken stars. In her hospital room on Earth, Sarah Chen felt each death through her quantum connection. Every destroyed world, every extinguished star, every billion lives lost. She experienced it all as echoes in her mind. The doctors found her in the corner of her room, rocking back and forth and whispering apologies to people who no longer existed. "He's not the same person," she told Maria during their next meeting. "The Marcus Reed who volunteered for Project Prometheus died somewhere in the void between stars. What's coming home is something else, something that has forgotten what it means to value life." Maria studied the latest reports from deep space observatories. The path of stellar destruction was getting closer to Earth. "How many civilizations has he killed?" "Hundreds, maybe thousands. I've stopped counting." Sarah looked up with haunted eyes. And he doesn't care. In his mind, they're just obstacles between him and home. He's convinced himself that getting back to Earth is worth any price. What happens when he arrives? Sarah closed her eyes and reached out through her quantum connection. What she sensed made her shudder. He's planning a demonstration, something to prove his power to humanity. He wants to show us what we abandoned when we declared him dead. What kind of demonstration? He's going to make the sun dance for us. Solar flares that spell out messages in space. The sun had been acting strange for 2 weeks. Solar flares that formed geometric patterns. Aurora displays that appeared at noon in cloudless skies. Gravitational fluctuations that made the tides behave like they were following music instead of natural laws. Every space agency on Earth confirmed the same impossible truth. Their star was being controlled by an external intelligence. President Martinez stood in the Situation Room surrounded by the world's leading scientists and military advisors. On the main screen, satellite feeds showed the sun's surface dancing with unnatural plasma formations that spelled out a simple message in perfect English. "I'm home." "How is this possible?" the president asked. "How can someone control our sun?" From outside the solar system? Dr. Maria Santos stepped forward. She had become the government's leading expert on the Marcus Reed situation, much to her own dismay. According to our quantum physicists, Reed's consciousness exists in a state that allows him to manipulate stellar matter directly. Distance is irrelevant at the quantum level. General Harrison, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, studied tactical displays showing Earth's defensive capabilities. "What are our military options?" "None that would be effective," Maria replied. "Reed isn't using ships or technology we can target. He is the weapon. Our nuclear arsenal would be useless against someone who can control the core of a star." Secretary of Defense Williams frowned. "So we just surrender? Let this madman hold our sun hostage?" "He's not a madman," said a quiet voice from the corner. Everyone turned to see Sarah Chen, who had been released from the psychiatric hospital to serve as a consultant. "He's a broken hero who spent 50 years trying to get home while Earth forgot he existed." Sarah walked to the display showing Marcus's message on the sun. "He doesn't want to destroy Earth. He wants recognition. He wants the world to acknowledge what he sacrificed for humanity." "After killing billions of aliens?" General Harrison snapped. "After leaving a trail of dead civilizations across the galaxy? Those deaths weren't intentional. In Marcus's mind, those aliens were just obstacles. He's focused entirely on returning to Earth and proving his importance to humanity." "President?" Martinez leaned forward. "What does he want specifically?" Sarah consulted the quantum readings she had been receiving. The connection was getting stronger as Marcus approached Earth. "He wants a public acknowledgement of Project Prometheus. He wants the world to know that he volunteered to become humanity's first stellar engineer. Most importantly, he wants to be remembered as a hero instead of a classified failure." "That's reasonable," the president said. "We can do that." "It's not that simple," Sarah warned. 50 years of isolation have warped his perspective. He doesn't just want recognition. He wants to demonstrate his power. He's planning to reshape the solar system to prove that humanity needs him. On the screens around the room, new alerts began appearing. Jupiter's great red spot was changing color. Saturn's rings were forming new patterns. Mars was showing signs of atmospheric changes. "He's already affecting the entire solar system," Maria observed. "This is just the beginning." 3 days later, Marcus Reed's consciousness finally entered Earth's solar system. His awareness flowed through the quantum field that connected all stellar matter, allowing him to sense every planet, every moon, every piece of space debris within the sun's gravitational influence. For the first time in 50 years, he was truly home. The feeling was overwhelming. Earth looked exactly as he remembered it, blue and green and beautiful, hanging in the void like a precious jewel. The moon still orbited in its ancient pattern. The asteroid belt still drifted between Mars and Jupiter. But something was wrong. Marcus had expected a hero's welcome. He had imagined parades and celebrations, monuments built in his honor, children learning about his sacrifice in school. Instead, he found a world that had moved on without him. His name appeared in no history books. Project Prometheus was still classified. The official records still listed him as dead from an experimental accident. 50 years of advancing science and technology, and humanity had forgotten their first stellar engineer entirely. The realization filled him with a rage that made the sun flare with unprecedented intensity. Marcus focused his consciousness on Earth's surface and began to scan the planet. He found Dr. Elizabeth Harper's grave. His former colleague had died 23 years ago. The laboratory where Project Prometheus had been conducted was now a shopping mall. The house where he had lived was occupied by strangers who had never heard his name. But he also found Sarah Chen. Their quantum connection had been growing stronger as he approached, and now he could see her clearly. She was in a government facility in Colorado, serving as humanity's primary advisor on the Marcus Reed situation. Through her mind, he could sense the fear and confusion gripping Earth's population. They were afraid of him. The people he had sacrificed everything to protect were treating him like a threat. Marcus reached out through their quantum link and spoke directly into Sarah's mind. His voice echoed with the power of stellar cores and the loneliness of empty space. "They forgot me, Sarah. 50 years I've been trying to get home and they don't even remember my name." In the government facility, Sarah collapsed as the mental contact hit her with overwhelming force. When she recovered, she was surrounded by concerned scientists and military personnel. "He's here," she gasped. "Marcus is in the solar system and he's not happy with what he's found." Outside, the sun began to pulse with angry red light. Solar flares erupted in patterns that spelled out words across the sky. Forgotten. Abandoned. Betrayed. President Martinez was brought online immediately. "Dr. Chen, can you communicate with him?" "Yes, but you need to understand something. The man who volunteered for Project Prometheus was kind and brilliant, and deeply committed to helping humanity. That man is still in there somewhere, but he's been buried under 50 years of isolation and abandonment. What's controlling our son right now is mostly pain and rage. What does he want us to do?" Sarah closed her eyes and reached out through the quantum connection. The mental contact was like touching a star, brilliant and burning and almost too intense to survive. "He wants acknowledgement," she reported. "He wants Project Prometheus declassified. He wants his sacrifice remembered. And he wants proof that humanity is grateful for what he gave up." "Done," the president said immediately. "We'll declassify everything, build monuments, name schools after him, whatever he wants." But even as the president spoke, the situation was getting worse. Marcus's rage was affecting the sun's stability. Solar output was fluctuating wildly, causing temperature swings that threatened agriculture around the globe. The magnetic field was shifting, allowing dangerous radiation to reach Earth's surface. Through the quantum link, Sarah felt Marcus's growing instability. It's not enough. He's beyond reason right now. The isolation broke something fundamental in his mind. He doesn't just want recognition. He wants to prove that humanity can't survive without him. As if responding to her words, the sun began to dim. Not gradually, but in sudden, dramatic steps. First 10%, then 20%, then 30%. Ice began forming in temperate regions as Earth's surface temperature dropped. At the same time, Marcus sent a message that appeared in every electronic device on the planet. "You forgot your protector. Now learn what happens when the sun abandons you as you abandoned me." Panic spread across the globe as people realized their star was being held hostage. Emergency sessions were called in every major government. Religious leaders declared the end times had arrived. Scientists worked frantically to develop solutions for a problem that had never existed before. In the government facility, Sarah was the only person who could still maintain contact with Marcus. Each conversation left her physically and mentally drained, but she was humanity's only link to the entity controlling their sun. "Marcus, please," she said during their latest contact. "You're scaring children. You're threatening innocent people who never knew you existed. This isn't what you wanted when you volunteered for the project." Marcus's response came loaded with 50 years of accumulated pain. "I gave up my humanity to protect them. I spent 5 decades learning to manipulate the forces of creation itself, all so I could return home as something more than human. And They forgot me, Sarah. They made me into a classified footnote while I was out there sacrificing everything for their future. We can fix that. The president is already working on declassifying Project Prometheus. Your story will be told. Children will learn about your sacrifice. It's too late for that. Marcus's mental voice carried the weight of dead stars and extinct civilizations. They need to understand what they lost when they abandoned me. They need to see what I've become in their absence. The sun continued to dim. Earth's temperature was dropping fast enough that emergency shelters were being opened in major cities. Agricultural regions were experiencing the first killing frosts in their recorded history. What do you want? Sarah asked desperately. Marcus's answer chilled her more than the failing sun. I want to show them what happens when someone who can control stars decides that humanity isn't worth saving anymore. Through their connection, Sarah felt his plan forming. Marcus wasn't just threatening to destroy Earth with solar manipulation. The sun was dying, and Sarah Chen was the only person who could save it. For 3 days, Earth had been growing colder as Marcus Reed slowly strangled their star. Ice storms ravaged tropical regions. Northern cities became uninhabitable as temperatures dropped below anything humans had ever experienced. Emergency shelters overflowed with refugees who had nowhere else to go. In the government facility, Sarah sat surrounded by the world's most advanced quantum technology. Dr. Maria Santos and a team of physicists had been working around the clock to modify the original Prometheus equipment, preparing it for humanity's most desperate gamble. The consciousness transfer device is ready, Maria announced. But Sarah, you need to understand, once your awareness enters the solar plasma, there's no guarantee we can bring you back. Sarah nodded, studying the machine that would either save Earth or kill her in the attempt. It looked like a combination of medical equipment and alien technology, built from components that hadn't existed when Marcus first made his journey 50 years ago. What happens if this doesn't work? She asked. Then we lose contact with Marcus entirely and the sun continues to die. Maria's voice was grim. Earth has maybe 2 weeks before the temperature drops low enough to threaten human civilization, permanently. Through the facility's windows, Sarah could see the dim sun struggling to shine through thick clouds of ice crystals. The sky had a gray, lifeless quality that made everything look like a photograph from a dead world. He's not evil, Sarah said quietly. The Marcus who's controlling our sun is broken and angry, but he's not evil. The man who volunteered for Project Prometheus is still in there somewhere. President Martinez joined them via video link. Dr. Chen, the entire world is counting on you. If there's any chance you can reach him. I understand. Sarah took a deep breath and looked at the consciousness transfer device. But I need you to promise me something. If I can't save Marcus, if the only way to stop him is to destroy his consciousness entirely, I need your word that you'll do it. Sarah, promise me. If humanity's survival depends on killing Earth's first stellar engineer, you have to be willing to make that choice. The president hesitated, then nodded. You have my word. Sarah lay down on the transfer table and allowed the technicians to attach the quantum resonance monitors. The original Prometheus technology had been dangerous 50 years ago, when science barely understood consciousness transfer. The updated version was still dangerous, but in ways that modern humans could at least measure. Initiating quantum consciousness transfer, Maria announced. Sarah felt her awareness expanding beyond the boundaries of her physical body. The sensation was like dissolving into light, becoming part of the electromagnetic spectrum that connected all matter in the universe. For a terrifying moment, she thought she might lose herself entirely in the vastness of quantum space. Then she found the sun. Marcus's consciousness had wrapped itself around Earth's star like a vast, angry mind made of living plasma. Sarah could feel his pain and rage burning through the solar core. 50 years of loneliness and abandonment concentrated into something that could literally move stars. Marcus, she called out through the quantum connection. I'm here. His response nearly destroyed her awareness before it had fully formed. The mental contact was like being hit by a solar flare made of pure emotion. Sarah, how are you here? This is impossible. Humans can't survive consciousness transfer into stellar matter. Technology improved while you were gone. Marcus, you're killing Earth. The sun is too dim to support life. People are dying. Good. His mental voice carried the weight of dead civilizations. Let them experience what I felt when they abandoned me in the void between stars. Let them learn what happens when heroes are forgotten. Sarah pushed deeper into the solar plasma. trying to reach the core where Marcus's original consciousness was buried under decades of accumulated pain. What she found there broke her heart. The Marcus Reed who had volunteered for Project Prometheus was still alive, but he was trapped inside his own mind like a prisoner. 50 years of isolation had built walls of anger and resentment around his original personality. The kind, brilliant man who had wanted to explore the stars for humanity's benefit was screaming silently while his darker impulses controlled their shared body of living fire. "Let me show you something," Sarah said, and opened her memories to him. She shared what she had learned about Marcus's legacy on Earth. Dr. Elizabeth Harper had spent her entire career advancing the science he had pioneered. The quantum consciousness, techniques developed for Project Prometheus had led to breakthroughs in medicine, communications, and space exploration. Thousands of people owed their lives to technologies that had grown from his original sacrifice. "They didn't forget you," she insisted. "The work you started changed everything. Every time someone's consciousness is backed up during dangerous surgery, that's your technology. Every deep space probe that maintains quantum communication with Earth uses principles you discovered. You've been saving lives for 50 years, even while you were lost in space." Marcus's anger wavered for a moment. Through the quantum connection, Sarah felt him processing the information. "But my name isn't in the history books. Project Prometheus is still classified. The world doesn't know what I gave up. Because the people who came after you were protecting your memory. Dr. Harper kept your work alive but hidden because she knew that if the wrong people understood consciousness transfer, it would be used as a weapon. She was protecting humanity from technology they weren't ready for." Sarah pushed deeper into Marcus's consciousness, trying to reach the original personality buried under layers of pain. "And she was protecting you too. She made me promise to watch for signs that you were still alive. She never stopped believing you would find your way home." The solar plasma around them fluctuated as Marcus struggled with conflicting emotions. "I killed so many people getting here. Entire civilizations died because I needed to manipulate their stars to create a path home. I know. I felt every death through our quantum connection. But Marcus, those deaths don't define you. What matters is what you choose to do now." "What I choose?" Marcus's mental voice was bitter. "I'm a monster made of living fire who destroys star systems when he gets angry. What choice do I have except to keep being a monster?" Sarah made the most important decision of her life. Instead of trying to talk Marcus out of his pain, she chose to share it with him. Through their quantum connection, she opened her mind completely and let him experience her memories of feeling his anguish for the past 3 years. Marcus felt Sarah's agony as she had experienced echoes of every civilization he had destroyed. He felt her desperate attempts to maintain her sanity, while fragments of his consciousness drove her to madness. He felt her determination to save him despite everything he had done. "You stayed connected to me," he whispered. "Even when it was destroying your mind, you maintained the quantum link because you knew I was still human inside. The Marcus Reed I've been trying to save isn't the star-manipulating entity that's been crossing the galaxy. It's the man who volunteered to risk everything for humanity's future. That man is still alive and he's still worth saving." Deep in the solar core, Marcus's original personality began to break free from the walls of anger that had contained it. For the first time in 50 years, he remembered what it felt like to care about something other than his own pain. "Sarah, I don't know how to undo what I've done. The aliens I killed, the stars I destroyed, I can't bring them back." "No, you can't. But you can choose what happens next. You can let your pain destroy Earth, or you can remember why you wanted to explore the stars in the first place." Marcus was quiet for a long time, his consciousness wrestling with 50 years of accumulated guilt and anger. Finally he spoke. "I wanted to find new worlds where humanity could build peaceful civilizations. I wanted to discover wonders that would inspire future generations to reach for the stars. You can still do that. The path you carved across the galaxy, all those destroyed star systems, they're not empty. You can seed them with the building blocks of new life. You can turn your trail of destruction into a path of future possibilities. That would take all my energy, all the power I've gathered from manipulating stellar cores. I'd have to give up everything that makes me more than human." Sarah felt the weight of the choice Marcus was facing. He could remain as a godlike entity capable of controlling stars, or he could sacrifice that power to create new life across the galaxy. It was the same choice he had made 50 years ago when he volunteered for Project Prometheus, giving up his humanity for the greater good. "What do you want to do?" she asked. Marcus reached out through quantum space, sensing the dead star systems in his wake, billions of worlds that had been sterilized by his passage home. With his power, he could seed those worlds with organic compounds that would eventually evolve into new forms of life. The process would take millions of years, but it would give the galaxy a chance to heal from his rampage. "I want to fix what I broke," he said finally. "Even if it means giving up the power that makes me special." That's what makes you human, Marcus. The willingness to sacrifice power for the chance to help others. Together, their consciousness expanded beyond the solar system,